Hi guys, it's Janeen with Pathfinders Downsizing Solutions. We haven't done an interview in a while, but I have a really special guest. His name is Craig Misener, and he is the Deputy Chief in Tarpon Springs for the Fire Department. And I'm delighted for a couple of reasons. We have recently moved his parents, and so we were delighted to be able to provide those services for him and his family. But then secondly, I just found out his birthday is the 17th of March. No, we're in May. 17th of May. Well, the day before, no, is it the 16th?
The 16th.
Okay, the 16th is his birthday, but the 17th is National Pack Rat Day. And we are going to talk about extreme content. And what I want to talk about with you, Craig, today is extreme content. What does that mean from a first responders? Because he comes in with the fire department and the sirens are going and there's ambulances and cops coming through and it's nothing but chaos, and you're trying to be a first responder and to be there to assist somebody in desperate need of an emergency situation. And then you pull up and you walk in the door because it looks beautiful from the outside, and you walk in the door and ruh-roh, we have a problem, Houston. So talk about that for us. Talk about extreme content.
Yeah, so the biggest problem with it is, like you said, is excess. So if we can't access the patient because there's so much excessive stuff that
What do you mean by excessive stuff?
So anything that blocks exits or entry to rooms or to pathways in a house. So if I come in the front door and I can't get from the front door to the kitchen without walking around multiple objects or having to step through them, or even if we've had situations where you've had it piled up on both sides where it's actually like trying to go through a tunnel to get to a room in the back where the person sleeps. So you literally have to almost climb or crawl through to get to where the person is because there's so much stuff. And it can be anything from boxes to paper products to food containers to, full-on equipment. There can be anything in there. And sometimes you can tell from the outside of a house, there's a lot of stuff outside too, or it's unkept. And sometimes the outside of the house completely kept up and the inside's just loaded with stuff. And then you have smaller cases where just a room, you can get in the room and the living room will look beautiful and, look all clean and neat. And then the bedroom where that person sleeps is completely covered. The whole bed is covered. You can't even see that there's a bed in there. There's so many clothes. It's piled up to the thing, and that's the only bedroom in the house, which means they're utilizing it as well. And they just, it becomes a problem getting the person to safety out and in, and how we would be able to do that.
I would think that there's other problems that kind of go with that. You're with the fire department. I mean, I can imagine like maybe somebody's had a heart attack. It doesn't have anything to do with the building, and just the challenge of kind of getting a stretcher in there if they need a stretcher and getting them out. But what happens if it's a fire?
Yeah, so the fire is probably the biggest risk. Obviously, medical's risk as well, just being able to get the stretcher in or how we're going to carry that person out, or just dealing with equipment to get to the patient in order to put it on them, like the EKG or any of those things. But in a fire situation, you're talking about increasing your fire load, right? So things burn very fast and rapidly now because they're made out of plastics and foam and things that are made out of petroleum-based products, which are accelerants, right? They make it burn really fast and really hot. So the more things you have, the more stuff that's accumulated, the bigger the fire, the faster it's going to burn, which means
you've got all that fuel.
Right. So so much more fuel. So the less time we would have to get you out if you were trapped, get that person out, and they couldn't do it. And also the ability for the person to self-extricate, right? They can't, if their pathways are blocked from getting out the door, then that is a problem for them as well, right? They're stuck, right. More likely a chance that they would be entrapped in their own house. And of course, then as fast as the fire moves and burns through, it'll burn through one area and move quickly through the house because there's so much stuff. It's got lots of fuel pattern to follow. It can follow it all the way through the entire house, and you'll have a fully involved house in a lot faster time than you would if you didn't have all of that fuel.
Now, we talked a little bit before we hit the record button, and you also told me about trusses and stuff and like the roof. So kind of go back into that too, because I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so now with buildings and the way they're built, especially residential buildings, they build them fast. So if you've ever seen a construction site now where they're building homes, they build the trusses. They're all set up. They look like those big triangles with the wood in the thing. And they're all built down the ground. Then they just kind of put them up on the house and they put the roof on them, right?
Right.
Well, the way they put them together so fast, they don't nail them together, the trusses together anymore. They use things like gusset plates, which are just these metal plates with little prongs in them that hold the structure itself together, which works good for weight and things like that, you know, for the weight of the roof and stuff. They're strong, they hold them that way, but under fire, under heat, they fail very, very fast. So what happens is if you have a lot of fuel in a house and it burns up, and obviously hot air rises, right? So it burns up into the attic, those gusset plates and those trusses fail much faster. And when those fail, the roof collapses. And when the roof collapses, the house comes down and you are inside. And that's why, and then that happens rapidly. It happens rapidly in general, but.
Okay, and what do you mean by rapid? Like 10 minutes, 20 minutes?
So it obviously depends. You all have different circumstances of, you know, what they used for their construction. So depending on the thickness of the ceiling or the board, how fast that burns through. But generally, most people use like 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch ceiling board. That you're talking 8 to 10 minutes before you're starting to look at roof truss failure. So, you know, depending on the size of the fire. So, and of course, the more content, the faster the fire, the bigger the fire, because it's got more fuel, right? It's hotter, faster, bigger, and that means it's going to burn that much faster. And so in Pinellas County, where I work, you know, our average response time is 4.5 minutes to a call.
That's fast.
That's really fast. We're one of the best in the nation, but that's not like that everywhere. So if you're in Hillsborough County or Tampa or those areas, you know, Pasco County, those responses might be longer. And every minute that was delayed in calling 911 before people actually outside start seeing smoke and somebody calls 911, that fire is building that whole time. And starting from the start to finish, that's a lot of times you see fires now where we get there and it's already past, we're into you know, really close to that. By the time we arrive on scene, the firefighters are making entry into a house. You're right at that point where flashovers can occur because everything burns so fast and hot. That flashover is what happens when it gets so hot in a structure that the gases that are in the air from the smoke and stuff actually ignite. And so it looks like.
Oh, that's when it kind of goes.
Yeah. So that's called flashover, and that's all that smoke and heated gases ignite. And
oh wow.
So you try and stop that from happening before we get to that point, but everything happens so rapidly now that that's just the nature of the way it is. So obviously, the more fuel, the faster it is, and you're behind. The firefighters are already behind the 8 ball to begin with. So.
You know, many of our clients are older, and because we downsize and move and resettle and stuff like that, but we do handle extreme content too. But I'm always trying to put in my head what that is like, that environment is like for a senior. And you know, I mean, they're not nimble like they were 20, so they're not running from the fire, or they're trying to capture, you know, get a hold of the cat or their spouse, or you know, whatever. And so they're kind of distracted and trying to get themselves to safety. And I can imagine in this type of emergency situation that it becomes very tragic. It can become very tragic quickly.
Yeah. And you know, there are a lot of things that are involved in the elderly when they're dealing with these types of situations to begin with. One, they're significant trip hazards, right? So they have problems with falls to begin with. So if you have a lot of stuff, there's a much higher chance of falling and breaking a hip or breaking a leg or an arm or anything else like that. Two, they also have issues, with equipment. So a lot of elderly people use walkers and have to use that. And a lot of them are on oxygen.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Is a big thing, right? So you're
Yeah.
on oxygen. Well, not only have you now dragging a oxygen tubing all the way through the whole house, right? Because they have to walk all the way through the whole house. But now you're also dealing with the fact that that's another added fire hazard, right? So oxygen increases the speed on which things can ignite, right? Because there are three things that you need for fire, right? You need fuel, you need oxygen, and you need a heat source. Well, if you have a fire, you have a heat source. So if something started, whether it be electrical or any other reason why a fire starts, that heat source started it. Then you have the fuel, so you have the content, and then oxygen. Well, you've just added that third element, increased it, and that makes it that much faster and hotter. And you have that same thing. Never mind the fact if they smoke or anything else that's added into that, right? So you have those added factors.
So are there resources in the local community? I mean, I know that, we love to take care of our clients and stuff like that, but there's also local resources sometimes.
Yeah,
But
so
there's a long list.
there is all communities have local resources. They do take some searching out to
Yeah.
get to them. They're not going to be like just readily available. It's just not set up that way. Usually from a fire related standpoint, or from us, from an emergency services standpoint, we use the governmental agencies. So you talk about, human and health services, the state health departments, the local health departments. We have some community resources with places like the Elder Links, which is a service that refers to other agencies and other private agency companies to assist with specific things, depending on what the needs are. But then, you usually have to have, with most of these cases, you usually want some type of therapist or counselor or some type of involvement there as well. And having family support is really important in those situations too. The family has to understand that there's usually a reason for it. And the saving of things that normally you wouldn't do. There's an emotional attachment to just keeping things, objects.
We've noticed that there's always, it seems to be rooted in trauma, and it could be trauma that's from childhood to something in adulthood or young adulthood, any time in the lifespan. But it just, their heart hurt, and it was a kind of in a indirect way, a way of self-medicating in a non-drug kind of way. And QVC addictions, we see those things where they're kind of, all those Amazon boxes are stacked up, and COVID hasn't helped because people are lonely and they're shut in and they don't have, the contact and the relationships like they used to. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. I mean, if you guys, and I would say that anybody that has this issue in their family or with a loved one or whatever, making that care point contact with them over the phone, just to be a touch point for anybody, would be incredibly helpful to start bridging the gap to have this conversation. By any stretch of the imagination, this is not an easy conversation, but having sometimes the third party resource, the community come alongside and support them would be huge. And I just really appreciate your time and how important it is to help our loved ones kind of clear out those spaces. Because till our conversation, you kind of can intellectually guess that, yeah, it's not a great living condition, nutrition and all that kind of stuff if there's animals involved. But when we got to meet you and your sweet parents and stuff like that, it was just like bells and whistles going off that, oh my gosh, from a first responders point of view, you know, the pack rat situation, or just extreme content, that's our nice way of saying it, is really, you know, it can be quite dangerous and be quite tragic. And to avoid that at all costs would be super important.
Yep, and that's the conversation to have, you know, if your family or your loved one is involved in that, is to make sure you refer to the safety aspects of it as too, because sometimes the logical brain can break through of the emotional brain, and you know, you have to let them know that it's not that you don't care for them and you want them to, you know, be comfortable and all these things, but these are safety concerns. These are things that you're really concerned about them, their safety, and they need to be concerned about their safety and the safety of the first responders.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But we go in and it's very dangerous for us, and you don't want, say you were able to get out of the house in a fire, well, the firefighters still have to go in there. They still have to put the fire out. They still have to finish doing that. And you don't, you know, I'm sure they don't want to be the one responsible for a firefighter injury or a firefighter death or something like that either.
Oh my
So
gosh, no.
those are the things that, you know, you can bring up to them, and sometimes that works, you know, that they'll start to realize that maybe they can do something about their situation. Obviously, you know, if it's deep seated and there are other issues, then those are the things that need to be taken care of in
But
there.
there are resources like that in the community too, for mental health professionals to come in alongside them and start kind of peeling all that hurt away, so that they can turn the page and create another chapter that.
There's a lot more mental health resources available now, especially with COVID.
Yeah.
You know, there've been a lot of pickup on that. So there's, you know, helplines and things like that to assist with those things.
We recently, not too long ago, early part of the year, we did an extreme content, and the son was the one, the father had passed, but the son was the one that was clearing out the house, and the man grew 3 inches from the time we started the project to the completion, because we were able to help change the legacy of his family, and this was a multi-generational issue. And he, oh, his cadence and everything, it was so uplifting for him to let go of this burden on behalf of his family. It was just really, it was very moving. He's a fantastic guy, and just loved working with him. But all of our clients, we just love taking care of them, and we meet them where they're at. And, you know, no judgment, but we're just here to, as a resource, to help get them, just like you guys are, just help get them to the next chapter and make it effective and just productive for them. So I thank you so much for your time, Craig.
You're welcome.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
From Pathfinders. Have a good one.
All right, you too.